The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the expressed written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
stationed atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized.
It's Wednesday, the 4th of July, Thursday, July 5th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. And this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. Happy birthday, America. I hope all of our American listeners have had just a wonderful holiday day today, celebrating everything that is good about your United States. Hope you had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, broadcasting to you live from the Great White North, on top of the mountains of central British Columbia, right here at SOR headquarters. We are 150,000 strong nightly on the SOR radio network and DTRN Deep Talk Radio. We welcome you into tonight's show. You can also watch us live on periscope.tv. You can also check out our archives. They are free at YouTube. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we got a plethora of features for you. Rock out to some Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read on the Encounter online, and so much more. We have one of those topics tonight that I've been waiting to talk about literally since I started this show, and I am so excited to get into this for the next 2.5 hours. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of weirdness, a lot of strangeness from the skies above, because Jan Aldrich is a guest that I've wanted to interview for a long, long time. He has a BA in history from the University College and University of Maryland. Aldrich retired from the U.S. Army with over 25 years of experience in spite of his many overseas assignments, plus in the continental United States, Jan has had no significant UFO personal experiences, but it's a thrill of a lifetime to try and figure out what is going on. His project since 1995 has been Project 1947 and continues and welcomes further contributions in the collection, research, and analysis pre-1947 and after. This is going to be a great show. So if you're wanting to know about Foo Fighters, what they are, what pilots in the military have seen, this is the one for you. I'm very excited about it. Don't forget, bottom of hour number 3 from the Encounter Online, our news section Everett Themer will be with us telling us the weird and strange news of the day. Jan Aldrich, thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight and sharing your 4th of July with us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. I think what might be good is to talk about how, at least I think, this whole business with Foo Fighters got really rolling. I mean, there were always sightings at the beginning of the war, and of course everybody remembers the Battle of Los Angeles. The Battle of Los Angeles is pretty interesting because at the end of the war, they asked the Japanese, "Did you do this?" And they denied it. Their military denied that they were involved there. So that's a kind of an interesting thing. I don't think most people that write on this have ever actually read the newspaper articles about that, but the people that should have known in Japan said that they were not involved. So it's sort of a mystery still. But I think for the Air Force and the commander of the Army Air Forces at the time, General Hapt Arnold, and he was well beloved by his men. In 1943, they were pursuing a strategic bombing campaign against Germany. B-29 and B-17s were, well, there are no B-29s in Europe. Let me correct that. B-17s, B-24s were bombing Germany. And one of the incidents that happened at Schweinfurt, which is a strategic ball bearings work, was as the bombers were coming through, these small silver discs came floating through the formations. Not everybody saw them, but few people saw them. It was a horrendous battle. Many bombers were lost in that campaign. The report about the small discs basically just came from a few aircraft, though. And for years, it was almost impossible to get confirmation. I think I found one unit history, and there was one line that said some of the bombers in one squadron had encountered these discs. Andrew Roberts in England, he was doing some research on it, and he had written to the archives, and they told him, "Oh, small discs, you must mean Project Blue Book. Your answer will be in there," which of course it wasn't, but that's what the archives told him. So that was no help at all. he was able to go to his own archives and find a copy of a document that did actually confirm this. So that was the confirmation that the bomber pilots had seen these things.
Right.
Roberts went ahead and wrote that up, and it's on his search for that and his search for the Schweinfurt sightings and finally finding the document is on my site. He and I cooperated on that. The real important sighting here of these small silver discs was in a place called Stuttgart, and these incidents have become mixed up in the UFO literature. There's no information about the Schweinfurt raid where an aircraft was set on fire. However, in the Stuttgart raid, one of these small discs hit the wing of a plane, and it caught on fire, and it crashed. So the commander of the 8th Air Force, who was in charge of the strategic bombing, he sent General Arnold, on account of this, he sent him a cable and told him that other pilots in the squadron had seen the aircraft hit, and he was really worried about this. He said, "This is a new German weapon, and it appears that we didn't even see how they released this into the formations." It also worried Arnold, and one of the first things he did is he wrote his superior, who was General Marshall, and he said, "This could be the end of strategic bombing in Europe if the Germans have this new weapon." He wrote also to Vannevar Bush, and he also complained about this. He said, this could end our whole air war in Germany as far as strategic bombing. Both Marshall and Bush wrote back and said, there's a number of things that could end our air war in Germany, so we're not concerned. Well, Arnold was. And I think this is the beginning where Arnold, looks for any kind of aerial phenomena that is strange, and he wants to nail it down right away. The OSS, the Office of Strategic Service, which was the spy organization, is run by a man named Donovan, a Republican, but even though Franklin Roosevelt was a Democrat, the president at the time, he did like Donovan, and he appointed him as his this secret organization, which was to go in and spy and do dirty tricks and espionage and work behind the lines. They had found that a factory in Switzerland was making these small devices, which probably were what the pilots saw. So after this, like I say, Arnold is probably very sensitive to these kind of things happening to his pilots seeing these things.
Right.
Now, in the meantime, pilots are seeing these things as they're ferrying planes across the Atlantic, the North Atlantic, just from Canada, from Newfoundland. They start off from the United States, and sometimes they land up in Newfoundland and Labrador, and then move on from there. Or they were going across from Brazil to Africa. And there were reports of sightings by these ferry pilots as they're going across the ocean. One was by, in 1943, Dr. Haynes, Richard Haynes. He was able to interview a colleague who had a PhD at the time, but at the time during the Second World War, he was a pilot. He was a Navy pilot, and he was flying what the Navy the B-24, which the Navy used. And he's going across just before he got to England. He's got this thing out on the wing pacing his plane. He didn't like that, so he went ahead and tried all kinds of evasive maneuvers. He turned towards it. He turned away from it. He dived. He climbed. And the thing just kept right on him. He reported when he got to England, they weren't really interested in it. They were more interested in what people were encountering over the combat areas. There's also a fellow that lived in Louisiana, and he told us about the same thing happening on the Brazilian route, and it's about the same thing. He had the balls of light come right at his aircraft, and then just go around the aircraft, and then pace his flight. And he also tried to evade them and get away from them, and they just stuck with him. Then after a while, they just left. Well, it's kind of hard for things to be out in the middle of the ocean like this at the time, with the fuel requirements that most aircraft had at the time, for them just waiting around for a ferry pilot to come by. First, you have to know that they're coming by. So this is a rather strange thing. Next, of course, is the in the 1944 in Europe, the 422nd Night Fighter Squadron. It's commanded by a man named, he was a Lieutenant Colonel, O.B. Johnson. So they call it, his nickname was Obi. He later became a general. So his pilots were coming back and saying, we've seen these unusual lights. We don't know what they are. They're definitely not aircraft. We've been chasing them down, or they've been following us, or they've been pacing us, and we can't do anything with them. And Johnson was not. He didn't want to hear about mystical lights. That's the last thing he wanted to hear about. So he told him he didn't want to hear these kind of stories. So his pilots started saying, "Oh, we're seeing German jets, German night fighter jets. That's what we're seeing." Now he was interested in that. That made him sit up and take notice. This is a new kind of aircraft, and he wanted to know about that. And it's one of the first reports of Foo Fighters that got into the press. I've got a clipping from the New London paper about Johnson seeing these things. This is before the the name Foo Fighter had even been coined. Johnson's guys they're up there in, they're flying around in Holland at night, looking for enemy aircraft or looking for trains and truck convoys and things like that they can attack at night. So as long as they told them they thought they were German jets, he would pay attention to them, and he actually passed the stuff on. The main organization that started seeing Foo Fighters started a little later than Johnson's bunch, and they were the 415 Night Fighter Squadron. They were stationed in France, and they were flying over the Germany, and they, same thing, at night, looking for anything they could find. They call them intruder missions. They just looking for targets of opportunity on the ground or aircraft flying up there so they could engage them. They did have a radar unit that was looking for aircraft, and they would warn them if there's an aircraft and vector them to the aircraft. Foo Fighters, there were no radar returns on these. The 415s didn't have any. They never got any radar returns. But these things they would come up from the ground sometimes, or they would just meet the guys in the air, and once again, they'd fly alongside. Sometimes they pursue. Sometimes they'd be pursued. Sometimes the pilots shot at it. Nothing seemed to affect them. They were kind of afraid to get close, though. They thought they might be a trap. If they felt if they got close, they might blow up and take the aircraft with them. The intelligence officer for this organization, he's the one that named them. Except his name you couldn't print. You couldn't print in the newspaper, so they said, "Hey, you have to modify your name here." So they came up with Foo Fighters, and it's from a popular comic strip at the time, where there's Foo, there's fire, and so they called them Foo Fighters. That was the one organization that started the name. These things have been seen, like I say, before. Right. And
Jen, I'd like to interject here with a question, if you don't mind, but why is this history of Foo Fighters so important, not only to the field of UFOs, but to the public aspect as well? Because, I mean, these were craft that were trying to almost, by the sounds of it, intercept American and coalition fighters in the air, and showing them technology that, was only of one's imagination at that time.
That's right. Well, we knew, that is, the Allies knew that the Germans were, they were very advanced. Their engineering and their aviation were very advanced. One of the things they were looking for was LoRa, which is low aspect ratio aircraft. Essentially, a lot of the things they were looking for were flying wings or disc-shaped aircraft. They had rumors about this, that these things existed, and they were telling the intelligence people on the ground, see if you find these. If you find these, let us know. We had a big intelligence effort going into Germany. They were looking for, as far as the Army Air Forces go, they were looking for enemy manuals, enemy equipment, enemy laboratories, anything to do with rockets. And one of the things they were looking for was these LoRa, these low aspect ratio aircraft. Sometimes they referred to them as tailless aircraft, and they were just wondering how they flew and everything. And the flying wing thing was just kind of amazing to them too. But they had a squadron run by a colonel named Watson, who figures almost all during the Blue Book era in UFOs. And he ran a squadron, and he called them Watson's Wizards. And their mission was to find and capture, and if possible, fly advanced enemy aircraft back to where the Allies could examine them. So sometimes they would find, when they overran enemy fields, they would find some of these advanced aircraft on them, especially the jets. The Germans were starting to build jets, and during the daytime there were a lot of them. At night, not so many, because you almost cannot have night fighters without radar. So there were not very many night fighter jets, and they were mostly around Berlin. So people like Watson were not encountering night fighter jets, but they were finding jets. And sometimes they would have to repair them, and then the pilots they would learn by doing how to fly them. It was kind of hazardous, and these guys would fly them back, and they finally decided they would collect them down in the south of France. A colonel named Seashore, who was later important in UFOs. He was in charge of getting them all to the south of France, and they were going to put them on a British aircraft carrier and take them back to the States. They were also capturing German technicians and German test pilots, and so they were being sent there too. Like I say, other people were going through and looking for any kind of plans, manuals, laboratories, the information from tests in the laboratories. They found a giant wind tunnel, and they overran the position, and they put it under guard, and they said, "We're going to take this back to the United States." And it was better than anything we had at the time. So it was actually a technological jump ahead. The Germans had it. Like I say, some of the aircraft that they found were experimental, but even so, they tried to any kind of advanced aircraft they tried to seize and move it back to the rear. With the manuals, those went to London, and Colonel McCoy was in charge of translating these and microfilming them. He had probably at the time the biggest microfilm operation in the world going on in London. They were microfilming all these manuals, technical reports, whatever they could get from the Germans. They were translating them. It was a giant operation. McCoy figures also later on in the UFO investigations. So it's kind of interesting. In the Foo Fighters, these things kind of get lost in history. And I'll explain to you how that happens as I go along here.
Sure.
it's kind of interesting that people weren't putting two and two together. If you read Ruppelt, the Project Blue Book chief from 51 to 53, he doesn't know very much about Foo Fighters. He keeps saying that he doesn't know very much about Foo Fighters. Let me get to that. Like I say, the 415th is seeing these things. Then there's another phenomenon they're seeing is these crystal balls. They seem to be at a lower altitude, and these formations, during the day they encounter these things. They can't figure out what they're for. A lot of the 9th Air Force, that's day fighters, they're finding these, on their missions, they're finding these things flying around. They can't figure out what they're for. They figure out there's something that they're probably enemy, but they can't figure out what's going on. And that actually gets into the papers before Christmas. The Foo Fighters, for some reason, and I can't figure out why, crystal balls were released. The Foo Fighters have been getting some press. Like I say, Johnson's thing is the earliest, but the other units, there's every once in a while there's a story about them. But the main stories come from a Associated Press reporter named he starts writing about these things, and they're actually released. I mean, all stuff from the front is censored. I mean, the censors take out things that the newspapers write about these things, but his reports are released, and actually, the pilots that see these things, they're released. Their names are released, and so if it's a story that's written for Buffalo, the pilots from the 415th, especially, that are from Buffalo, their names get mentioned in that story that goes to Buffalo. The guys in Chicago, their stories get mentioned in the names that go to Chicago, and the guys in St. Louis, they get named in their stories. So it's kind of like the local guys. They get the people back home get some news about it, and they get this Foo Fighters information, which it doesn't appear that they're doing any damage. They're just there. Okay, I said that Arnold is worried about these kind of things.
Yes. So
he contacts his scientific advisor over there in England, Dr. David Griggs. He tells Griggs, I want to know what these things are. Send me a report. We don't know. We don't have his contacting Griggs, but Dr. James McDonald, he interviewed Griggs while he was still alive. And Griggs said, yeah, I couldn't figure out what the heck these things were, but you know what? They were everywhere. They were in Europe, India, China, Japan. Everywhere I went, these things were there. He says, I wrote a report, especially for General Arnold, and sent it to him. My conclusions were inconclusive. I told him what I learned, but I couldn't say anything about them as far as exactly what they were. He didn't know. We haven't been able to find that report. We've been looking through General Arnold's papers, which is a chore because they're not all in one place. Now, General Arnold had another guy that he sent to Europe, especially to look into this. General Arnold's not the only one that's doing this at the same time. The War Department's sending messages to Europe saying, "What are these things?"
Jan, at that time when this was going on with General Arnold and everything, what year are we in? And did they think that all of these sightings were created by Nazi Germany because they knew they had the scientists? They knew they were working on rocket propulsion.
Right. Well, they also had a rocket plane, which took off from and went up into the formation. It had a very short duration. I mean, it could go up. It zoomed up into the formations, and out of the nose it would shoot the bombers or aircraft it encountered, and then the pilot would eject, and the rocket would also both the rocket and the pilot would parachute to the ground, and they try to recover the rocket and reuse it. So that was a strange object when it was first encountered. That gave these people a lot of the pilots a lot of. They felt they were really creepy things. The other thing was that they used to do is the Germans would tow into the formations behind a plane. They would tow into like a wing or a piece of debris that would be on fire and then release it into the formations, mostly to scare the pilots. And they do it mostly at night to mess up their night vision and everything else. It's in the New York Times. The pilots call them scarecrows. So that was a German thing. The Foo Fighters, no, they couldn't. They thought they were German. They thought they were German, and they thought Germans had jumped ahead. And there was a lot of articles around 1944, 1945, right at the Christmas and New Year's time, about all the amazing super weapons that the Germans had. The highly technological weapons, and the Germans were even bragging that they had an atomic bomb. Now, what they said was an atomic bomb didn't sound like what actually became an atomic bomb, but they were talking about this. I think it was propaganda, but they were working on an atomic bomb themselves. But it was a failure. The Japanese Navy and the Japanese Army were both working on an atomic bomb, but they weren't far enough along to affect the war. We're talking about the silver discs show up in 43. Foo Fighters first show up in 44 and go into 45. And the crystal balls, they show up at late 44, and they seem to go into 45. About this time, they start seeing things in the daytime, too. Disc-shaped objects. actually things that you would rather actually say were UFOs. So Arnold had an aide. This man wrote his speeches for him. He wrote magazine articles. In fact, Arnold sent him to test things like the rafts on the aircraft in case they had to ditch in the water. So the rafts, he sent this guy to test them out and report back, and then he would write articles for the popular press and also for the airmen, about how these things worked and everything. He was a friend of Elliot Ness. His brother worked for Elliot Ness. So he and Elliot Ness wrote, before the war, they wrote articles together about gangsters and things. His name was Joe Chamberlain. But during the war, he had a rank of lieutenant colonel. He had worked at, as far as I can find out, he had worked at the University of Columbia. I don't know if he's a researcher or a writer or an instructor, but he was a popular writer. He wrote magazine articles too. That's one of the things he did. And like for Arnold, he wrote speeches and anything. While the war is still going on in Europe, he sent Joe Chamberlain to Europe. Chamberlain said, when I got to Europe, they gave me a 45, a Jeep, and a driver. And his thing was you could go anywhere you want. But I think Arnold told him to go to the 415th, the Night Fighter Squad.
Was the significance of that to try and track down this phenomena specifically?
I think so. So Chamberlain gets to the 415th. He collects all the information he can. He talks to the pilots while they're, they rest during the day, so he gets to talk to the pilots, and he finds out that the man that wrote the story about the Foo Fighters in the newspaper, Bob Wilson, had spent time with the pilots, just like he had, and so that Bob Wilson's articles on Foo Fighters are not based on secondhand information that he got. Bob Wilson's stuff is from talking to the pilots firsthand. There's also another reporter for the Stars and Stripes that's named Ed Clark. Actually, it's Edgar Clark, but he uses the name Ed Clark. And Chamberlain in his notes puts down that on Christmas Eve, Ed Clark, this is Christmas Eve 1944, on Christmas Eve, Ed Clark scooped Bob Wilson. I couldn't figure out what that meant. There's no other explanation. He's just, it says, Ed Clark scooped Bob Wilson on Christmas Eve and exclamation points. I couldn't figure out what that meant. So we started looking through the Stars and Stripes because that's the newspaper that Ed Clark wrote for. That's the GI's newspaper. And we looked at the Mediterranean editions and the European edition and the Paris edition and the London editions. There is an article by Ed Clark, and it is about going up with the 415th pilots on Christmas Eve. Says nothing about Foo Fighters. So I'm looking for articles where Ed Clark scoops Bob Wilson. Can't find any. Turns out that Ed apparently couldn't write about it in the Stars and Stripes right away. And he couldn't write that when he went up on Christmas Eve, he did see Foo Fighters. But years later, when he got back to the States,
yes,
in 1950, he did write about, I went up on Christmas Eve and I saw Foo Fighters. And what he saw was, there's a red, brownish ball that came up from the, looked like it came up from the, coming up from below them. And it came up and paced their aircraft for a while, and the pilot decided he was going to turn into it, and it went off and disappeared.
How often were these Foo Fighter sightings happening with pilots? Was it a daily occurrence that something was going on? Did they think that once they realized it wasn't the Germans that were doing this, did they think that there was something otherworldly kind of paying attention to the air battles of this Great War?
I think there might be some that did that, but I think mostly they thought it was German. It wasn't necessarily daily, but there were so many of these reports. It's kind of amazing that it took so long to find these things in the paperwork. So Ed Clark scoops Bob Wilson by going up and seeing a Foo Fighter for himself, but he apparently can't write on it until he's out of the Army. He wrote for paper in Hawaii, so that's why we didn't find this till just, I'd say about 2 weeks ago. I put Clark's article, and what Clark is doing in 1950, he's comparing the Foo Fighters to flying saucers. And he's saying, yeah, this is what we saw. This is the same thing. What they're talking about as flying saucers, this is what I saw. Chamberlain, like I say, he not only talks to people in the 415th, he talks to some of the guys that are flying during the daytime, some of the fighter pilots, and they're seeing things. So he's got this information. Now he does other things. He wants to write articles about displaced persons and released prisoners and other things that he thinks would be interesting, but he is writing this article. Now, I can't prove that Arnold gave him orders to go and do this, but I assume since they work so close together that's probably what Arnold did. He said, go find out what these things are. Chamberlain comes back to the United States, and he's in Washington, and one of the first things he does is he calls the intelligence people, and he says, can I get more information on these things? So they provide him what's going on in the Pacific. They provide him information on that. They provide him more information on what's going on in Europe. And he starts writing an article. The war in Europe is over now that he's back in the States. And he starts writing an article for this. The intelligence people look at his article twice, and they tell him, "Oh no, you got stuff in there you can't talk about. Rewrite it." He rewrites it, Then he sends a copy to Major Augspurser, who is the commander of the 415th Night Fighter Squadron. So Augspurser looks at it and he says, I really like that you supported my men here, because a lot of people are giving them a hard time about this whole thing. So he's told that he can publish the article. Not by this time, after he's written the article and got it cleared, he's told he can publish the article, but he can't use his rank or his position. He can't say I'm a special aide to General Hap Arnold, and I'm a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. He can't say that. So he just uses his regular name, and he publishes it in the American Legion magazine for December. Gets $500, which all his writings during wartime, and he did quite a few, he donated all his fees to widows and orphans.
Do you think that with everything that was kind of going on during that time, that they were able to gather collective notes and information that was possibly leading to any type of plausible conclusions?
Well, here's what happened to the 415th. The intelligence officer gathered all these reports together. He sent them up to the 1st Fighter Command, and then they sent them up, and they ended up with the British. And the British had their own ideas about what these lights were. They thought maybe they were lights on German aircraft in their nose, on their nose. That was one of the ideas they had. So the British Air Ministry sent back a thing. Well, we think they're just German. We think they're German, but we don't think that they're any problem. They're just nuisance. They're just nuisance things. Now the British have been dealing with these sightings of various aerial phenomena before we even entered the war. So, but it's hard to say if they ever collected everything in one place and looked at it they dealt with it ad hoc as it showed up. Now, I've been told by various intelligence people that when during the war, now this is back in the 90s. I was told this, that both the 8th and 9th Air Force did do reports on Foo Fighters. They did their own studies. I haven't been able to verify that. I haven't been able to find them. We did find Strategic Air Forces in 1945 in January. They did talk about Foo Fighters, encountering Foo Fighters, and what they could be, but it's just we don't know what they are. They were complaining about other things. They said that the Germans maybe had something that stalled their aircraft or caused problems with the electrical system. They weren't sure what that was. They didn't know anything. But the guys were reporting that. As I said, the British, their Air Force is reporting these things. Guys on the ground are seeing these things. they're being reported through channels by people on the ground. There's one fellow that pretty well late in the war in 1945, their way into Germany, and they thought they were going to be attacked. He was with an armored division, and they were on the other side of Audubon, and they were in the woods at night, and they were camped there. They were going to start again in the morning, and they were refitting and everything there. And these things came across the Audubon and into the woods, and they weren't sure what the heck they were, and they just speeded away. So that's from the ground. There's a number of these accounts.
Right. I'm going to cut you off right there because we do have to go to break here. Jan Aldrich is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His website, project1947.com. We're going to find out the significance of 1947. And when it comes to the field of ufology, if you do know, of course, Roswell happened in 1947, right around this time. So we're going to find out a little bit more about that with Jan coming up in hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio. Stick around. We got more coming up next.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Hi there, this is Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm going to take you for a ride every Sunday night on Spaced Out Sundays. I'm going to set up your week with some strange tales from across North America, from psychic readings, Sasquatch, UFOs, to the most haunted locations. Come join me at spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, and let's get weird together. I'd love for you to join me. Spaced Out Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
There's news, and there's The Encounter. This is Spaced Out Radio News Director Everett Thiemer inviting you to check out The Encounter. Our half-hour news segment every Monday through Friday night is different compared to what you're used to. Our goal is to bring you the weird, strange, and interesting stories the mainstream tends to leave out, and stories that will make you scratch your head in disbelief. The Encounter can also be found at spacedoutradio.com and on our Facebook page, SOR The Encounter. Come give us a read.
We're bringing scientific thought to the paranormal. Hi there, this is Spaced Out Radio scientist Chris Cogswell. Join me, Chris Zuger, and Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month, where we break down the who from the woo when it comes to everything paranormal. We'll investigate and try to bring sensible answers to those straight and sometimes outlandish questions people have. Hey, not everything has an answer, but we'll do our best. Listen in to Reality Paranormal only on Spaced Out Radio.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Thanks for being with us. Tomorrow night on the show, Nelson Dellis comes in to talk about what it's like to almost die on Mount Everest. We're going to get into the tallest peak in the world tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. We welcome back everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network, including Deep Talk Radio. And don't forget, if you're looking for our archives, they are on YouTube. YouTube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Cucurbitaceous. Cucurbitaceous is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, space travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we got a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. We do have some changes coming up on the website, so stay tuned for those. Jan Aldrich is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. We're talking Foo Fighters. We're talking Project 1947, the entire history and its beginnings of studying UFOs within the United States government. Jan, welcome back to the show.
Hi. I guess we could pick...
Yeah, before the break, we were talking about why this was going on, why these studies were happening on the Foo Fighter phenomena. Yeah,
and back in Germany, and this is newly discovered stuff just now, just last couple of years. General MacDonald, George MacDonald, he became this is after the war is over, he became the Chief of Air Force Intelligence in Europe. This is still the Army Air Force, but this is in about 1945. Now he wrote a report for the War Department, and he said, "Look, one of the guys that we have here now, McDonald is going to be the future head of Air Force intelligence in the United States, or overall. But right now he's in Europe, and we find out that one of the guys that's investigating Foo Fighters is a man called O'Mara. Now, he will also become involved in UFOs later on as a assistant at Wright Field, ATIC, and he'll get in all kinds of trouble because of his talking out of turn later on. But he is also his O'Mara's thing is that he gathered up all the German scientists and kept them occupied. He housed them and fed them and provided a library for them to keep them occupied while they were thinking about what to do with them. As I said, Joe Chamberlain wrote his article, and it was published in December of 45, and it was immediately forgotten. It's published in American Legion, so there's a lot of people who read American Legion magazine. But remember, most of the soldiers are still, by December, they're still overseas. They're still in the Pacific and in Europe, and they're bringing people home and actually discharging them. But apparently, not too many people read this article because it languishes. Now, one of the things that happens after the war is over, the Army loses 12 million, or the military loses 12 million military people. They're discharged. The thing that happened is everybody that remembers that Joel Chamberlain wrote this article, the guys that censored it and everything else, they're apparently out of the military. Nobody remembers that Joe Chamberlain wrote this article. When UFOs come on the scene, nobody remembers that Joe Chamberlain wrote this article. It doesn't come up for discussion after the UFOs come into the press. Nobody remembers it. Now, I want to talk about General MacDonald's conclusion once again, he's just like David Griggs. I don't know what they are. And he puts down a long list of German scientists and engineers that he's talked to. I mean, they've interrogated all these guys, and they've asked them, what were you doing? How did you do these? And everybody's talking to them, we don't know what you're talking about. And they're finding out that the Germans are seeing, there's actually some reports of the Germans seeing these things. So after the UFOs come on the scene, and in 1949, Donald Keough starts investigating UFOs for True magazine. Somebody clues him into Foo Fighters. So he goes to the Pentagon, and he's got two contacts in the Pentagon, and he asks them about Foo Fighters. He says, I've heard about these things, and I'd like to know something. And so they go. He's calling them on the telephone. So they go away from the telephone. They come back in about 10 minutes and say, it's all classified. You can't see it. So Keough takes that for. However, he does get some veterans that actually give him a couple of reports. So he does have some reports, but not official. So it's classified. Okay. So for years, that's what everybody thought. They're classified. We're never going to see them. The government's hid them so well that we're never going to see them. Ruppelt comes on the scene in 51 when they revitalized the UFO project. And he's the guy that's going to revitalize this project, which has languished for a while from about 49 to the middle of 51. And one of the things he does is he goes to the Pentagon and he looks through their files. He says, well, you guys haven't sent all the stuff about UFOs to right field. I want everything. He's going through their files and taking stuff out. He's going around right field, and he's talking to the guys that used to be in the UFO project. He's getting them to open their desks, and he's taking stuff out of their desks that they got on UFOs. So, as my friend Lauren Gross says, he's a data gathering Superman. He wants to get every bit of data he can. And so I'm saying to myself, why does he not get anything on Foo Fighters? Why does his book say he doesn't know anything on Foo Fighters? There's a 1952, a rather famous article is written in Life magazine. Ruppelt is interviewed for that article, and he says in Life magazine, well, I don't know very much about Foo Fighters. Look magazine does an article also. Again, Ruppelt said, I don't know very much about Foo Fighters. Okay, for years we couldn't figure out why that was. But then we got the top secret history of Air Force intelligence for 1952. At the beginning of the year, the very time that Ruppelt's going to the Pentagon trying to find anything he can about UFOs that hasn't been sent to right field, they had boxed up everything about the Second World War and sent it to Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. So all the material on the Second World War, as far as intelligence goes, had gone to Maxwell. There was nothing for him to find in the Pentagon. They've retired the records to the historians. The historians got them at Maxwell. So that's the why Ruppelt didn't know. I mean, he knew the scuttlebutt about Foo Fighters, but he didn't know anything let's put it this way, concrete about him. And he didn't know about Chamberlain. In the 80s, early 90s, a fellow named Jeff Lindell, he's going to college on the GI Bill, and one of the things he wanted to do was study Foo Fighters, and he got to study it by saying, hey, this is a folklore thing. So can I write some papers on folklore and Foo Fighters? And then he started interviewing veterans, and he got quite an earful. About the same time, Barry Greenwood is poking around at the National Archives, and this is where almost the first documents about Foo Fighters come out. 1992, all the way from 45 to 1992, we had almost no official documents until Greenwood found the 415th records on Foo Fighters in the National Archives. It's just, and it's not because they were hidden away or people just didn't know how to look for them. And so that's the first taste we get about the official things. Then a lot of people like Andy Roberts and a fellow named Keith Chester, who wrote the book on Foo Fighters called Strange Company, which is I highly recommend it. He wrote an excellent book on it. There's not very much speculation in it. He's got his own ideas and opinions, but he pretty well sticks to the facts. But there's still plenty of documents to find on Foo Fighters. Unbelievable amounts of documents to find on Foo Fighters.
Right.
Lindell found documents. I found some documents. Like I say, Dave Clark in England, he's found a bunch of documents in the British archives. Occasionally some are found in the Australian, and we think there's stuff in the New Zealand archives, but they haven't come out. Canada, Jeff Lindell started talking to World War II pilots in Canada, but he pretty well stopped his project before he got really going on that.
Right, and one thing we should also preface, too, is this just wasn't an American phenomenon that we're seeing these Foo Fighters at the time. Pilots from France, Canada, all the Allied nations were having these weird intercepts as well, weren't they?
Yes, and The Russians were seeing them. The Azor Division, which was a Spanish volunteer position that was fighting with the Nazis in Poland, those people saw one, and they were watching an air battle from their bunker, and they looked out, and there's a silver disc in the air over the battle, like it's monitoring the battle, but it's not engaging in the battle. So, that's kind of amazing.
That brings up another interesting question, Jan. Did any of these Foo Fighters, UFOs, whatever we want to call them, ever engage in any battles? Because, fast forward to Vietnam, there is a story out there, I don't know how true it is, that a B-52 bomber was actually shot down by a Foo Fighter.
I don't know about that one, but our guys tried to engage him. The British tried to engage him. I think the Russians tried to engage him, too. In Italy, the Polish army was fighting in Italy. The Russians had released the Poles They had the Polish army in concentration camps. They released the Polish army to fight with the Allies against Germany in '43. So they're fighting. The Poles they let them keep their army together. The Allies did, and they're fighting in the Germans in Italy. And there's over the front, there's this, once again, a silver disc hovering there, and the Poles figured it was a German, so they started shooting at it. Well, not only did the Poles start shooting at it, the Germans started shooting at it, and they were both shooting at it for a while. It didn't affect it. It just stayed there for a while, and then it took off. When it went out, it started off at a 45-degree angle and just sped away in a couple of seconds. It's typical UFO type maneuver. So, several reports of people trying to shoot these things, and they don't seem to have any effect. In the Pacific, now the guys in the Pacific are getting radar contacts with these things. The night fighters in the Pacific are encountering these things, and they're having radar contacts, and not only from the ground but from the aircraft. And there's a number of official and then unofficial reports where a fellow quoted from his war diary that he was on an aircraft and he had the radar on, and there was an object that was on the radar. I have that on my site, as a matter of fact. That was a letter written because of the Life magazine article. So Ruppelt's getting letters about Foo Fighters from these guys, but his problem is he doesn't have anything official, so he doesn't quite trust people writing him letters. He writes on a lot of these letters that he gets because of Life magazine and Look magazine, old, and he tells his clerk to file them. So they answered the letters. They said, "Oh, thank you for your information," and they just filed them. They never did anything, and by the time they were in a position to do anything, the 52 flap in July was upon them, and they never had a chance to look at this stuff. And that's the reason that Foo Fighters are kind of like an orphan in the UFO category. It's like Ed Clark said in his article. He said these seem to be just the same thing as we're seeing now, UFOs. Or as he said, at the time, 52, they still call them, almost everybody called them flying disc or flying saucers. On my site, on project1947.com, if you go to the historic reports, I've got 43, 44, 45. It's just crammed full of Foo Fighter stuff, both official and unofficial. Veterans accounts and things that I've, like the 40th Fighter Squadron. Actually, some veterans organizations have they find their unit there, and they find that their guys saw Foo Fighters, and they've actually taken the stuff on my site and put it on their site. So, and of course, there's not hardly any World War II veterans that are engaged in this kind of activity, any veterans activity anymore. So these are guys that they just want to have this as a legacy thing on their site. So there is a lot of material, and what I've tried to do is not put the same material on my site that that was in Strange Company that Keith Chester had in his book. I tried to there's some duplication, of course, but mostly I tried to put other things than were in his book. So people go to the site, they're going to get things that were not in Chester's book, and they can compare them to what he has. I did help Chester a lot. Barry Greenwood helped Chester. Chester apparently didn't understand that some of the things I gave him were from Andy Roberts in England and other people who had been doing Foo Fighter research. Chester wrapped up his book, but he continued going to the National Archives. He's gone there 100 times. So just recently, he sent us all his Foo Fighter files. It's a number of bankers' boxes full of documents from the Foo Fighter era, from the World War II era. And we're just now we made a rough index, but we're going to start doing a more comprehensive index. I've just put like I said, Ed Clark. I just put one of his articles, which has just been found by Barry Greenwood. I just put that on my site. That's just brand new. There's another thing about Foo Fighters. The Hanford Atomic Works in Washington. Okay, they're making the material for the bombs, the plutonium. And they're absolutely, it's absolutely secret. And Navy pilots that are training to go to the Pacific, they're reconstituting squadrons out there for the aircraft carriers. Navy pilots that are being trained, integrated into replacement squadrons, are flying around in Washington, and they're encountering UFO-like objects. This is 1944-45, flying over Hanford. So the 4th Air Force decides, and this is on my website also. I've got it in a special 1945. They're encountering these things over the Hanford reservation. The 4th Air Force says we need to make it official that we're going to have the Navy stand by to intercept these things when they see them. They're already intercepting the Japanese balloon bombs that are coming to the United States and Canada. But this is another thing that's going on. These intrusions over Hanford. Robert Hastings found a veteran a few years ago. Unfortunately, he died before we could tell him that we had official documents that supported what he said. It's just like a couple of days before we had the documents and we're going to tell him about it, and his wife said he passed away. Anyways, he had been involved in this attempt to intercept aerial intrusions over Hanford. So we don't have all the official documents on it. We think that the FBI was involved here. So there's, and we think that Hanford probably has records of these things. After the second atomic bomb was dropped on Japan, Colonel Mathis, who was in charge of Hanford, he let a reporter from the Seattle Times go on a tour of Hanford. He took him on a tour of Hanford. And in the article that the reporter wrote, which is on my website, he confirms that there were aerial intrusions at Hanford during the war. So that's that's a rather amazing chapter that
it is. It very much is.
It's not well known. Like I said, once again, I found the 4th Air Force documents and some of the other supporting material. NICAP had the original document or the original account from a veteran that said that this was going on up there. And then MUFON found another veteran that encountered these things late in 45, just before the war was over. And like I say, Hastings, Robert Hastings, he found another fellow. So it's just kind of cooperation together. And I have the information, like I say, most of the information on my website. And I'm fascinated by it. I mean, this is just...
Well, we really all should be a little bit more intrigued by it if you have any interest or fascination with the UFO phenomena, because this leads us to, 1947 and the Roswell crash. And that's where the entire UFO phenomena really took off in the United States with that incident. I still find it funny that a lot of people don't recognize that there were 2 crashes on that day out of all of the videos, documentaries, books that have been written. Nobody ever mentioned St. Augustine, which I find is very intriguing. Nonetheless, 1947 was a pivotal point. We have Kenneth Arnold in Washington State. We have the Roswell incident. Why did you base everything off of 1947?
Well, back in 65, 66, when NICAP was just reaching their strides, and we didn't have access to any official stuff back then. We didn't have the Project Blue Book files. The Air Force was just giving us statistics. We had almost nothing official unless something leaked out every once in a while, or some of the official witnesses would actually, say something in the press or come to NICAP and actually give them a sightings. We didn't have any access to official information about that time. Ted Blocher decided he would do a project on 1947. Nobody knew exactly, we just had a few sightings from 1947. Nothing was known about Roswell at the time. We just had a few. We had Kenneth Arnold sighting. Everybody wrote about Kenneth Arnold sighting. United Airlines, about a week and a half later, by a United Airlines captain named Smith and his co-pilot Stevens, they saw 9 objects in front of their aircraft while they were on their air route. And there were just a few from 1947. If you look at the books at the time, there's very few sightings from 1947. Blocher was in a touring company for some of these plays. They would play on Broadway and then they'd go around the country. And he was in a touring company. So each place he stopped in the touring company, he would go to the local newspapers and start doing research. And he finds out there's not just a few sightings in 1947. There's hundreds of sightings in 1947. He goes to the Library of Congress, and they have giant collections of newspapers there, and he goes through those. He finds out there's some overseas. There's plenty in Canada, too. And some in Mexico. He comes up with 850 UFO sightings. He puts that into a book that NICAP sold, and it's called The Report on the 1947 UFO Wave. UFOs start before Arnold. Excuse me. They started.
Want to grab a drink there?
At the beginning. Yeah. They start at the beginning of the year.
Right.
But before Arnold even sees any, there are already reports. There's a few in the press, not very many, but there are a few. Afterwards, there's a lot of people who say, yeah, well, I saw these things before Arnold did. In fact, the FBI runs down a very interesting report, which is the Weather Bureau in Virginia. There, one of the weather observers is tracking a balloon, and he just happens to in April he just happens to see a UFO. The Brits had a radar incident in January of '47. So they were seeing things, and they were having aviation chases for about 2 days in January '47, way before Arnold. Now, Blocher also, this is kind of like a first. He got to go to right field, and they let him look at the 1947 files for an afternoon. So he actually gets to get his hands on the official files. Plus, there's Dr. James McDonald at the University of Arizona. He takes some of Blocher's more interesting cases, and he calls these people up. Now, some of them are dead, but there's a lot of them in the early '60s that are still around. So he is able to interview these guys, and he's very thorough on interviewing them. So that's the Blocher thing. Now, Blocher continued. I find out about this. Blocher's about 90% done with his research, and he's writing his results, and I find out about this. So I'm a little late to the party. So I start looking at newspapers where I have access to things. Around here in New England, and of course you got Yale University, and they have giant collections of newspapers. So I start helping Blocher out. Most of mine, he gets these after he wrote his book. He keeps collecting 1947 things till he's over 1,000 incidents. Okay, I go away in the Army for almost 25 years. When I come back out, I think I talked to Ted Blocher, and I asked him, did he think he had all the sightings? He told me, no way. He said there's still newspapers. He said there was about 11,000 newspapers in 1947. Plus, there's other sources of these things. And I said, okay. I contacted Foo, which is a fund for UFO research, and I said, I talked to Don Berliner. I said, I'd like to do a project on 1947. And you know what he told me? He says, everybody's doing Roswell. We don't need anybody else. There's enough people that are researching this. I said, I don't want to do Roswell. In fact, I want to stay away from Roswell. I just want to do the other things that were going on in 1947. He says, Blocher already did that. You're wasting your time. So I said, okay. So I went up to Washington State and went to Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. just to demonstrate that there's still more stuff to find. I was able to come up really fast with about 250 incidents that Blocher didn't have. Because by this time, the states are gathering newspapers in one, usually one institution, like the University of Idaho at Moscow is they got a giant collection of newspapers, and the Washington State Legislative Library, they've got a giant, or their state library there's gathered all the newspapers from around Washington, or a good number of them.
Right.
So I came out with all these things. I told Berliner, I said, I want you to see what I've got. And he says, well, if this is what you got from an area that Blocher really covered, I can't imagine how many more of these things there are. And I said, well, I want to go through and do this all over the place. So I got to, that's about the time that Bigelow was handing out money.
Yes, which somehow got into Canada as well.
So, yeah, well, I don't know if Musgrave got his money from the Canadian government, right? Yeah, I think he got $10,000 from the Canadian government. Anyways, I applied to the UFO Research Coalition for a grant so that I could travel around to the different state libraries or universities that had large collections of newspapers and researched 1947. Now, I told him, I said, there's no sense of me just doing 1947. If I do this, I want to do everything. I want to do as much as I can before 1947 and up to the 60s at least. And I said, after about 1965 or so, there's a lot of people that had newspaper clipping services. So maybe it's not so important to check these out. That was not a smart idea. But anyways, it kind of limited what I could see. The first priority was to find 1947 cases that Blocher hadn't found. Second was to do sightings from 1900 to 1946. And there were a lot of leads that I could follow up at different places. And then afterwards, of course, there's the big flap in 1950, which people today know almost nothing about. And it was a giant flap. It wasn't as big as the 52, but it was a giant flap. It wasn't as big as 47. We had no idea as how big 47 was until I started going through. And I didn't go through 11,000 newspapers in North America. I went through about 3,500. So there's still plenty to find. And places like Eastern Canada, I didn't get to that.
Right.
I got to Washington, D.C., about 40 states, and I think it's 6 Canadian provinces. Yeah, I did.
In the research regarding 1947, there is a lot of pieces to the puzzle that go through that year. What do you think really signified the turn in the interest in UFOs? Was it just Roswell? Was it the fact that the war was over, we needed maybe something else to focus on? It's right before the Cold War. There's a lot going on in that era.
Yeah, it's, well, first of all, 1947 was it was some of it was summer madness, you know. Some of it was these things had shown up in the newspapers, and then we had the biggest skywatch that probably had ever happened. So one of the articles was talking about here in Connecticut, the mayor's going to the town hall in Hartford, and he looks, and all the people from the town hall, all the clerks and the police and everybody are outside on the front steps looking up at the sky. He says, "What's going on here?" "Oh, we're looking for flying discs." He says, "Get back to work." But that's like everywhere. People are looking for things in the sky, and actually they see things, because at the time there was a lot more weather balloons being released all the time. So things like that. A lot of IFOs are being reported, and of course you got the good old hoaxers that are always making things up, but there's actual, underneath all that, seems to be a giant wave of UFOs sightings going on from about the time of Arnold to about the 10th or 11th of July. Then it falls off to very low levels after that. Doesn't pick up again until 1950. They're just minimal sightings after that, just a few a week through the 48, 49. You know, there's some little concentrations, local concentrations, but nothing like 47 till 50. And then goes back down from 1950. 1952 is the biggest wave till probably 1957, and then into the 60s, 66, 67 wave, just humongous. So,
well, one of the other things, and I want to point out to our listener here, Joseph, who brought up the fact that it was also the first Men in Black encounter happened in 1947 as well.
Yeah, I'm not such a fan of the Men in Black, but there is at the beginning, like it's like Ruppelt said. If you wanted to know what's going on with UFOs, people looked at, especially officials looked at you with the same suspicion as if you wanted to know how many A-bombs were in the arsenal. That's what Ruppelt said. It's the official investigation started in the 3rd of July. Dave Johnson, who is the editor, the aviation editor at Boise Statesman, he called up Nathan Twining, General Nathan Twining at Wright Field, and he told him about Arnold's sighting, and he told him about the forest fire lookouts near Mount Rainier having a sighting on the same day, and he told them about a couple other sightings. And so in the records for Wright Field, there's a little note Twining had scribbled, and I have this on my website. He'd scribbled stuff about, having several sightings, and he said General Brent Nell, which is his next ranking guy, he says, we're going to look into this. So he gives them orders right there to do that on the 3rd. So probably based on what Johnson had told him, because Johnson's an aviation booster, and he's also responsible for the in great part for the Idaho National Guard. So Twining's, this is a aviation booster. I'm going to listen to him. He seems to know what he's talking about. Twining had authority to start a project on his own. He could do it in an interim basis until the next budget. Then, if he wanted to have a permanent project, he had to request one, and that's exactly what happened. He started it in July, and he got approval from Vandenberg. I think the Herald Tribune had an article said Vandenberg
right,
more or less approved this, but Project Sign was the permanent, or the actual, as far as the project being official and blessed and everything. It's interesting that Twining took that on his own, but he was authorized to do things as an emergency measure, and he thought this was something that should be looked at.
We got about 4 minutes here before we got to go to break, and I want to get to Joe's question here, and he is asking, Jen, what do you think about Major Kehoe, Major Donald Kehoe?
Kehoe was, of course, a pioneer in the field as far as looking into UFOs. He had his own ideas. I mean, he pretty well figured out from the he thought from the very beginning almost that these were interplanetary. So that was what he pushed. Let's say he definitely dug for information. Unfortunately, he would dig out information and he wouldn't keep it. He'd pass it on to the editors of True, which is who he was working for in the beginning. Up to about the time he became the director of NICAP, he was still pushing stuff off to True. Ted Blocher asked him to bring in his, when Ted started working down at NICAP, he asked him to bring in his files so Ted could copy them. It wasn't necessarily disappointing what he brought in, but Ted figured, God, this guy's been at it for so many years. This is all he's had. This is all he's saved. So, like I say, he had just, if he found something, he turned it over to NICAP. Not to NICAP, to True. Now, in 1952, 53, he got 41 cases, specially declassified for him from the Air Force. Al Chop and Dewey Fournette and Ruppelt selected the cases for him, and he got these declassified for him. And so when I first went down to NICAP, my first trip to NICAP, which is in '63, I wanted to see an actual Air Force case, because Keogh talks about it in Flying Saucers from Outer Space. Here's the list of cases that he got at least summaries of, so I wanted to see them. I looked in the NICAP files. They let me look in the NICAP. They're not there. I'm saying, where are they? Oh, True magazine. Now, he did have things that people had given him, and he did bring it into NICAP in the beginning, but like I say, Blocher just bothered him forever. And so he brought in all his files for Blocher. Blocher didn't, at the time, Xerox was just a new thing, 65, 66. It's a new thing. It wasn't very good. Sometimes it faded. So Blocher didn't trust Xeroxes. So he retyped all this stuff. Everything that Keogh had, he retyped it.
Amazing.
I'm not saying that there was a small amount. It was a big amount, but for all the time that he had been in it, and all the material that had gone through his hands, you might say it was a disappointing, especially if you look at 1952.
Right. Right.
So,
Jan, I'm going to get you to hold on right there as we're going to hop out for our final break of the night. Jan Aldrich is our guest tonight. His website, project1947.com, if you want to check out his amazing information. We're talking about the turn of the UFO tides. It all ties into 1947, and you look what's going on now, you could sure tell that it all started back then. It all seems to come together, doesn't it? We're going to find out more and your questions from the chat rooms in about 7 minutes' time. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. We'll be right back.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
The Call of the Wild is in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is one of the hottest bars and restaurants in the city. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose will rock you like a hurricane all night long. Great food with everything on the menu at $6.95 near the corner of Nelson and Granville. Get your horns up and come rock with us. The Moose Vancouver, the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
You know, it's hard being the bad man of ufology, but that's just the way that I like it. This is Chris George Zuger, and I'll be hanging out with Dave Scott and SOR scientist Chris Cogswell for Reality Paranormal, the second Wednesday of every month. And our job is to break it down and come to conclusions as to what is really going on in the supernatural world. I'd love for you to join us and bring your questions for us to investigate right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
When it comes to the news, we look for the stories that the mainstream won't cover. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter. This is News Director Everett Thiemer. The Encounter is about the weird and strange stories that occur daily, and we scour the world looking to bring them to you. You can hear me with Dave Scott every Monday through Friday in our Encounter news segment. Read us online at spacedoutradio.com or check us out and give our Facebook page a like at SOR The Encounter. So come give The Encounter a read.
From the mile-high state of Colorado, sharing our signal around the world, I invite you to Spaced Out Sundays. Hi, I'm Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm closing out the week by taking you on a paranormal journey to the world of the weird. Ghosts, aliens, psychic phenomena, I will hit it all in your questions too. So let us highlight the paranormal for you. So come join me for Spaced Out Sundays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, only at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for being with us. Tomorrow night on the show, we talk about Mount Everest. Nelson Dellis almost died on the infamous mountain a few years ago. He has gone back since. We're going to find all about the legends and lore of Everest tomorrow night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We welcome back everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio. And don't forget, you can check out our archives for free. Yes, free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Cucurbitaceous. There we go. Cucurbitaceous is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Nobody really knows what cucurbitaceous means, but we're using it as the password nonetheless. Now, our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we got a plethora of features for you. We're going to be making some changes on that very, very soon. And you can right now rock out to some Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the encounter online, or watch some great features that we have for you. Jan Aldrich is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio, his website, project1947.com, as we look into UFOs, the beginnings of the research, what caused all of it. Jan, welcome back.
Okay. I think I ought to mention Lauren Gross's work as far as history goes, early history of UFOs, which is, of course, that's what I'm interested in.
Sure.
He has 45. Well, it's bigger than that now, but he's 48 booklets, starting from pre-47 up to 63. He wanted to do just the, up through the 50s, because he thought that would be a pretty good research project. There's a lot of material. I convinced him to go to 63. I said, well, until Kennedy was assassinated, it was still the 50s. After that, of course, after Kennedy was assassinated, the country changed. The 60s were that's when the 60s really started. So he's done these books now. I'm not sure exactly how he did it, but I kind of think that what he had to do is take every newspaper clipping he had, which are thousands of them, all the official documents he had, all the magazine articles he had, and just lay them on the floor as he's doing each year. And in some cases, his books, it goes minute by minute as to what's happening on the UFO scene. 1952 is just amazing. You read the what's going on in the East Coast during the Washington sightings. It starts up in Boston and moves down the East Coast. All kinds of encounters, radars and everything, and then it goes down into Washington, D.C. It's just kind of amazing. And not just Washington, D.C., Langley Air Force Base. They're having sightings out there, radar sightings. And, of course, Florida was... and these booklets are on my friend's site, or also the head of Sign Historical Group, which I also have. That website is contained in Project 1947, but we also did about 200 interviews. I wasn't involved in all of them, but Tom Tulene did about 200 interviews of historical personnel in the UFO field, including people that were involved in the investigation themselves and witnesses and things like that. His site is the Sign Oral History Program. He's got all of Lauren Gross's books on there, and they're for free, and you can just download them as you wish. The other project that I was involved in is UFOs in Government. It's written by Robert Powell and Mike Swords. It's about a 5-year effort trying to talk about government involvement in the UFO field from the early days up till now, and it's not as, in some cases, not as detailed as Lauren's site, but it's mainly on government, uses government documents and things like that. Not only that, we have the Spanish government documents, talk about the Spanish, Australian, Swedish, British, or not the British, the French. So that's and that's actually been recognized as a book that university libraries should have on hand. That's kind of a unusual thing in this day and age, because UFOs are practically you can't have these things in academia, but we got favorable reviews from the from academia, so it's about 57 university libraries that have this book now.
Wonderful. I got a couple questions coming in from our audience here, and both Trip and Kat were asking if we could go back to the Battle of Los Angeles here. Were you ever able to find any solid information as to what actually went on that day?
Well, let me tell you. I had a fellow out there in the West Coast, and he said, "You know what? I want to do research with you on this thing." And I said, "Believe me, it's far more complicated than you ever think." And he says, "Oh no, we should be able to wrap this up in about a month or so." So he started collecting newspaper clippings from all the way up and down California. And there's a lot more going on than just the Battle of Los Angeles, and official documents and things like that. He said he finally just sent me everything he had, and he said, "I don't want to touch this again. It's too complicated. I can't figure out what's going on. It's just completely beyond me." So I think that's the way a lot of the researchers feel in this thing. In the beginning of the Battle of Los Angeles, it says the Navy gave the alarm. Huh? What does that mean? How did they give the alarm? How did they figure out that there should be an alarm? But that's all it says. The Navy gave the alarm. Did they have radar? What happened? That's kind of interesting. Some of it appears to involve some of the anti-aircraft guns were apparently shooting down their own Met balloons that they had sent up to get the wind, so they could have wind correction. So that's part of the thing there. Like I said before, at the end of the war, they asked the Japanese, "How did you do this?" And they said, "We didn't do it. We don't know what you're talking about." Now, they did send a plane into Oregon to try to start forest fires. It didn't work too well. And, of course, they sent all the the Japanese balloon bombs later on.
So do you think it was an actual UFO, or do you think it was something else? Maybe something more human, and at the time, maybe German?
They sort of believe that it was Japanese from Mexico. That's one of the theories, that they hired planes from Mexico, and that's what we're seeing. It's hard to tell. Nightcap, if you remember, there's a book about pre-1947 sightings called Mysteries in the Sky. It's by Gordon Lohr, who was a Nightcap assistant director, and Harold Denault. And one of the guys they interviewed was actually there. He was an air raid warden at the time. And he says he saw multiple objects flying around up there. There are reports of multiple objects. There are reports of one big object. There's reports like a green fireball at the very beginning. It's hard to tell exactly, to tease this, what's really there. And of course we have all these phony document people trying to phony up documents. You may have seen some documents from Timothy Cooper that say that one of the things they say is that supposedly a letter to the president. Well, the chief of naval intelligence, Admiral Anderson, knows about this. They're trying to say that they're trying to keep this secret. This is a phony document that Cooper made by himself, and it just shows that you can't trust anything that Timothy Cooper came with. He's already admitted to being a hoaxer. But you can look this up yourself on the internet and find out that Admiral Anderson was not head of O&I during that. The way the Navy, the information he got from the Navy indicated that Admiral Anderson was head of O&I in the beginning of 1941, but by the time the Battle of Los Angeles happened, he was in charge of battleships at Pearl Harbor. So he was not there, and the Navy tripped Cooper up, and so that shows that his document is phony. So you get these phony documents in there, that just messes the whole incident up more. And you know, there's a demand for more information than we have. People want more information than we have, so there's people that are willing to supply it or give lectures on it or whatever. It's hard to get good research when this kind of thing is going on.
I fully understand and can appreciate that. Is that one of those stories that we may actually never know the truth to it? Or is it the fact that people keep leaning towards UFOs because it's the sexier explanation?
I think the latter part is probably true, but I don't know what the explanation is either. And like I said, we have a number of official documents on this thing. I don't want to say that everything is fake. No, we have a good number of official documents on it. The Army and the Navy at the time were arguing about what happened there at the very time. In fact, there's a political cartoon it shows the Army, the office of the Army, and there's the office of the Navy, and there's rifles pointing out of both offices, and they're shooting at each other. And somebody's opened the door at the other end of the corridor and said, "Stop that shooting in the hall." And it's about the Battle of Los Angeles. It's a political cartoon. It was at the time was about it. So the Navy had their version, the Army had their version, and I guess ufologists have their version. I don't. Yeah. I'm going to say this. It's a hard nut to crack.
This leads to Tripp's question in the chat room. He goes, "What do you think, Jan, then, of the news article pics that show there might have been a shield around some sort of UFO?"
Well, I know that there's a number of reports, not official, of guys. Well, there are official reports. Yes, there are. In fact, a couple of times, these guys in the Pacific area, they mistook their own planes for balls of fire, and they shot at them. You know, it was the B-29s. They get hit, and they'd start burning, and then guys thought that was some kind of Japanese weapon, and they actually were shooting at our own guys. There are unofficial reports of guys firing at Foo Fighters, and like I say later on, when O'Mara was there at right field, somebody at right field said, "Well, yeah, we fired on UFOs," and then Stringfield and Keogh just jumped on that, and they issued a clarification, say, "Oh, well, we were talking about Foo Fighters back then, Second World War, not now." So,
right.
But as far as I know, nothing ever affected the Foo Fighters.
Right. Right. I got another question coming from our audience, this one from Rick over in the UK. He is asking, Jan, what is your opinion then on Diaglocker and the incident that happened many years later in Kecksburg?
Well, it's really hard to say about that one. That appears to be more than one thing going on. It's sort of like the Battle of Los Angeles. There's appears to be a satellite failure and a meteor at the same time. I say, oh my God! I say, there's a lot of things going on. I have problems with the recovery incidents. I don't think it's that well documented, but somehow NASA lost the documents for Kecksburg. Somebody took them home. Somebody was allowed to take them home, and they kept them for themselves. That seems to be... I know Leslie Keene she tried real hard to get everything on there, and there's documents that were missing and actually taken by somebody unauthorized. Let me tell you, there's stuff in Blue Book that's been taken out unauthorized, or there's stuff that's missing. I talk about this on my site. It's interesting that, of course, Hynek was the advisor for Project Blue Book, so he got a lot of these documents. So some of the documents that are missing out of Blue Book, I put some on my site, that Hynek had. He had copies. They gave him copies of things, and they're missing from Blue Book. And in some cases, you can go to Hynek's files and find them there. I write a lot about the Philippine Sea, the aircraft carrier Philippine Sea, from 1952, from February 1952, they had a radar visual sighting on the Philippine Sea. The Navy they were kind of concerned about that because that was the first time they had a radar visual sighting at the same time. And that's missing. There's information about the Philippine Sea sighting in there, but the actual documents are missing. Fortunately, Hynek had copies of them in his files. So you can see them on my site, what he had in his files. They were at CUFOS. And I actually found an operations officer that was on the Philippine Sea at the time, and he said there's more going on than just what was in those documents.
Right. Do you think, as we only got about 4.5 minutes left with you tonight, Jan, do you think that the way it ties into what is happening now with the entire disclosure movement has some credence, or do you think there is a lot being covered up still that may never come out, even with what is going on today?
I believe there's you can do FOIAs. Well, look at all these TTIP things. You can't even find out where it is in the Defense Intelligence Agency. Everybody says no record. There's something going on. There's something fishy going on there, let me tell you. If they can't find any records in their own, So I believe that the government is obstructing a whole bunch of documents. Now there's a lot of things that people haven't looked at. I mean, I'm planning another trip to the archives and other places, and I believe that I'm going to find stuff because I know there's stuff, and I think I know where I can find it. But there's a lot of other stuff it's either buried like the Foo Fighters stuff was, or it's purposely sequestered.
Do you think that there is some sort of cover-up going on with today's disclosure movement that has been happening, which involves the To the Stars, or do you think that the real movement is still with the people who are having experiences?
I think that, I'm sorry to say that To the Stars is kind of a disappointment. They made these big generalized statements at the beginning. It's unclassified and it's real, and we're having real problems with some of the. Okay, so you've issued these videos, but you can't show us where they came from or how you got them. It's really frustrating. We're supposed to take a lot of things that they say on face, and you can't find very little official confirmation that. Now, the DOD spokesman, she did say that Lewis is who he says he is, and he worked for the government.
Yeah.
She doesn't go into any detail.
Yep.
It's frustrating. I really don't want to get into a big thing about that, though. I want to just do my own work and keep on
I don't
going.
blame you.
If they have something, fine. If this is the way they're going to disclose it, they've done a poor job, I think.
We got about 1 minute left with you tonight, my friend, and I want to say thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio. Please tell my audience where they can find your information to check out your research.
It's at www.project1947, all one word, .com. And
awesome.
It's there's quite a bit of information, and there's quite a bit of historical stuff that maybe has no relation to UFOs, like how the Office of Special Investigations came to be, and the triple nickel 555
yes.
Parachute Regiment. That's on my site.
Wonderful.
Good information about them.
Jan, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio. Really appreciate you taking the time to be on here. Everett Themer and The Encounter coming up next on Spaced Out Radio.
This is the winter of our lives. We come to play the final scene. The curtains closing in the darkness we expose what lies beneath.
We're encountering the encounter tonight with Everett Themer as we take a look around the world at the news of the day. Sometimes it's weird, sometimes it's strange, and sometimes it is absolutely WTF. That's why we bring you The Encounter. Don't forget you can search on Facebook for the latest news on our page, facebook.com/SOR The Encounter. Please give it a like if you do not mind. I would greatly appreciate that. Everett, always good to have you on the show. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
I am doing great too, my friend. Getting a little bit of a laugh here. I have someone in the Spreaker chat room who I don't know. We were just talking to the stars with Jan Aldrich. And Joseph puts on there, and I think it's a joke. He says, everyone knows To the Stars is BS except for Dave.
Why would he think that you don't know?
I don't know. Maybe it's, he says, I think you want to believe, Dave. It's fine. Last I checked, I was pretty critical since the entire announcement on October 11th about this group. Just putting it out there for the record.
Well, hey, I want to believe in To the Stars too, but they haven't shown us anything really to believe in.
See, that's where you got to go with Poison. Give me something to believe in. Remember that song? Give me something to believe in. Bret Michaels nailed it just perfectly. Just perfectly. I would say.
It's not Guns N' Roses, though.
No, it's not. Hard to believe that, you know, what's the guy's name, the guitarist for Poison, C.C. DeVille or something like that?
Yeah.
That he beat out Slash for the job in Poison.
Can you see Poison with Slash, though?
There wasn't enough heroin at the time in Poison for Slash to be attracted to that group.
Yeah, but he'd make up for it in the hairspray fumes.
That is very true. In Slash's autobiography, he actually says he went to the studio, unpacked his guitar, absolutely killed it, but C.C. DeVille actually showed up, full makeup, the bleached blonde hair that was teased all over the place with a lady on either arm. And Slash said when he saw that, he knew he wasn't getting the gig.
You know, you're at that age where you could remember having bleach blonde long hair, teasing it up a little.
Never did. Wanted it.
I'm disappointed.
I know. It was the iron fist I was ruled under as a child. But nonetheless.
I pictured you in the 90s with some nice hair. And
oh yeah, I had a good mullet. I mean, you had to. If you played hockey, you had to have a solid mullet coming out of your helmet.
Take it back. No mullets.
You know, that's just the way it went. Just the way it went. Played hockey, you had to have the mullet.
Never understood those.
It's a hockey thing. It's an absolute hockey thing. Anyways, let's get to the weird, strange news of the encounter today, Everett.
Well, you were in San Francisco not that long ago, and I'm a little surprised you didn't bring this one back to me.
Uh-oh. What did I miss?
The most recent event was a 20-pound bag of poop was found on a street corner in the Tenderloin area of San Francisco.
What?
Apparently, over the past decade, San Francisco has had a 400% increase in the number of calls to their 311 system regarding feces left in public spaces.
I mean, if you got to go, you got to go.
You do. And this is being attributed mostly to their growing homeless population.
No, and I understand that. Go ahead.
But still, who walks around collecting poop, or is it a communal bag, or who has 20 pounds of poop to just drop off on the side of the street?
I don't know, but that's not a job I would want. That you got to be paying at least $30 an hour for that job. You totally have to, because I mean, never mind how gross it is, how gross of a job it is, but I mean, you have to think there are health risks with that. But I mean, it does go to show, because, like, for instance, Vancouver has a very high homeless population, and it's sad to say they also have a very high concentration of of heroin users on the downtown east side. Tragic area of Canada. And, you know, these people, a lot of them don't have a place to go. Just because they're homeless doesn't mean they don't go to the bathroom. And with restaurants and stores all having, you know, no use for people coming into, you know, like no public bathrooms, you don't see many cities investing in porta potties. You know what I'm saying? So what do you do? Now, Everett has been having troubles with his Skype as of last night. I wonder if we're in one of those trouble zones again. Wonder if we're in one of those trouble zones, because I'm not hearing him. I know he's hearing us. I'm going to hang up on him and call him right back. It happens. He lives in one of those weird areas where sometimes he gets internet and sometimes he doesn't. Can you hear us now, Everett?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent.
Yeah. What's with your Skype?
You know, I think it could be up because of the thunderstorm and flooding we're having yet again.
Goodness. Anyways, I was saying, you know, like, you know, you have these safe needle exchanges popping up all over the place. What's wrong with putting a few porta potties up so these people have a good place to at least go to the bathroom? You know,
but what is a few then? With the growing homeless population there, it is the largest homeless population in the U.S. So what is the solution? I mean, it's a big investment to put porta potties everywhere. And what does that do to the neighborhoods in the city? Would you want to live in a neighborhood where there's porta potties on the corners?
No, but there's enough street alleys to put them in.
True. I'll give you that one.
You know, you hide them. You know, or you be like Japan, where they, you know, put up these bathrooms, and even Vancouver has installed a few of these bathrooms that are just on street corners, but they actually look pretty cool. You know, I mean, maybe they need to invest in more of that. You know, I mean, we got to stop lack of a better pun, we got to stop crapping on homeless people and figure out how to help them out a little bit more, because a lot of them aren't just drug addicted, wastes of oxygen. These
Right.
are human. These are human beings. They deserve some sort of basic human, how do you put it? Human rights, I guess, is what I'm saying. They deserve some basic human rights and dignity, like a bathroom to go in.
Well, when I was a kid, even the parks always tended to have the outbuildings with the public bathrooms.
Yeah.
And now with crime and parks closing at dusk or by 9 p.m., a lot of times those buildings get locked to prevent vandalism and crime and drug use. So they're even being shut out of the public services.
I see you. I see you there. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. That's a terrible story.
I just had to bring it up, though.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I really don't blame you, my friend. I really don't blame you. Let's move on to story number 2.
Well, strangely enough, we're moving.
No pun intended there.
I didn't even think of that one. I did happen to notice that we're moving west to east, though, which is kind of ironic.
Excellent.
A 92-year-old woman has been arrested for allegedly murdering her son because he wanted to put her into a nursing home or assisted living facility. This woman, Anna Mae Blessing, which to me, that name just sounds like she should be running with Bonnie and Clyde. She shot her son. Allegedly, she had 2 pistols in her robe. And when they were discussing this, she shot and killed her son and attempted to kill his girlfriend. So this gentleman's girlfriend called the police. And when the police arrived, basically she said, he was going to ruin my life, so I decided to ruin his.
Wow, that's taking being a pissed off parent to an entire new level.
I think this is proof exactly why you don't let your mother-in-law's family move in with you.
Oh, my goodness. Like, well, I mean, I get, at 92 years old, she's already got one foot in the grave. All right? She already does. I mean, there's no excuse for that. All right? But the fact that, somebody who is potentially having to go into a senior's care facility should tell you that they probably shouldn't own guns at that point in their life. And,
don't take our guns.
Well, no, I mean, I understand the point. I'm not bringing up the whole Second Amendment thing. That has nothing to do with that. Especially on the 4th of July, I will get roasted here. Roasted. But, I mean, at 92 years old, what the hell is she packing 2 pockets full of heat for? And to kill your own son. How much hatred do you have in your life to kill a family member? I mean, I didn't talk to my sister for 4 or 5 years. Almost 5 years.
Her son was 72. So he's not that far off from potentially going into one of these facilities either.
I understand that. I mean, maybe he couldn't care for her anymore because of his own health issues. That's just terrible.
But, I don't know if you've noticed the trend lately that some of these older people are getting quite ornery. I mean, we had the woman who fought off and choked the bobcat to death. And I think we've had some other older people doing some pretty strange and interesting things.
I mean, maybe they should have had a duel.
Oh.
Duel it out. Are duels still legal down there? I think in some states they are.
No.
I'm pretty sure.
Maybe Kentucky.
Maybe some of our listeners who are there, could you tell us, is dueling still legal in some U.S. states? I need to know this.
I say with 100% confidence, dueling is legal in no states.
I'm Googling it. I mean, they should have had a duel, man. Is dueling legal in the USA?
If it is, I'm going and buying some dueling pistols.
This article comes from March 9th, 2017. Is dueling still legal in the United States? Let's see here. Dueling is specifically prohibited in the United States Armed Forces. Okay. Dueling is not specifically covered by criminal statutes or penal codes in several states. So it is not technically illegal in those states. However, dueling could be covered under other crimes such as assault with a deadly weapon, manslaughter, murder, or other criminal acts which a prosecutor could be creative with. So technically, in some states, it is not illegal. That's crazy. Why don't we see any good dueling anymore?
I feel a road trip coming on, but at least a one-way road trip.
Yeah, for one of us, for one of us, good old dueling. We got to have some dueling happening here.
Time to get out the paint guns and practice a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it at all. Not me. It's illegal here in Canada, just so you know.
Specifically dueling.
Specifically dueling, yes. Specifically dueling. Bill Cardwell has a new weekly feature here called Poop News in the SOR Space Travelers Club. I'm going to assume that's for you. But that goes to the previous story. We got time. I guess we got to do a poop of the night or something. That's kind of disgusting. I don't think we actually will, but
I think we'll stay away from poop for a while.
Oh, hold on. Bill also just posted an article. It is now legal to challenge someone to a duel in Canada. This comes out of Kelowna Now, which is in the Okanagan of British Columbia. Beautiful area. Right? So I wonder if it is legal.
Don't make me mad.
This is what the opening paragraph says. There is no better way to settle a dispute than a good old-fashioned duel. But for years, some of the more archaic parts of the Canadian Criminal Code have been denied Canadians the rights to a duel. I would like to see how that plays out. I really would. Let's move on to story number 3 here.
I think you can really get your teeth into this one. Carlos Martinez and Marcel Ozuna of the Cardinals became roommates recently in Milwaukee when the hotel that they were staying at is the Pfister, and they were staying in rooms that were haunted.
Yes.
They all ended up in, was it Peña's room? And they sent out basically a tweet. We are all here. We are all in Peña's room. And we're stuck here. We're going to sleep together. If the ghost shows again, we are all going to fight together.
No kidding. So here we have Major League Baseball players who are superstitious enough as it is, going into a hotel room, getting freaked out by a ghost, and then having a slumber party with their teammates, hoping and praying it doesn't turn into a horror movie.
And this isn't the first time that this has happened with a major league team. The Pirates had some incidents with this, and some other ones did, where it's very common for the teams to stay at this hotel when they come in to play the Brewers. And this is sort of an ongoing. The place has a history of hauntings, but I think the significance here is they actually mentioned that John Gray, the pitcher from the Rockies, hunts ghosts in his spare time.
Really? We got to try and get him on.
That would be really interesting. But I mean, here's another case where public figures are coming out and talking about their experiences, their fears, what they've seen, and even what they're doing about it.
Well, I mean, does that hotel know it's haunted? Like, do the hotel staff? Major League Baseball, it doesn't matter which pro sport you're involved in. there are certain hotels. Each team has like 3 or 4 different hotels they will stay in every particular city. I'm wondering if that works for Major League Baseball, because you'd think that the team may look at getting into a different hotel if it's scaring their players, or if ghosts are scaring their players.
Possibly. You would know better than I do. Do they have specific contracts with hotels, or does each team?
Some of them. The league may have contracts, right? Certain pricing and so on and so forth, right? But each team,
so they may be obligated or required to stay at that hotel.
Could be. It would be very interesting. But you know what? Let's hold on to that name of that pitcher there from Colorado, and let's see if we can get him on the show in the off season.
That would be a really, really cool show.
Yeah, let's see if we can get him. We got time for one more, Ev.
Okay, well, today is the 4th of July.
Yes.
And every 4th of July, there is the Nathan's Famous Hot Dog Eating Championship.
Makes me sick every time I think about it.
And once again, Joey Chestnut won, eating 71 hot dogs in 10 minutes.
How do their stomachs not explode from that? Because have you seen these guys do it? They're like wretched pigs doing this.
I don't know how they do. I don't know how you could fit 71 hot dogs into my body anywhere. Especially in 10 minutes.
I know. You got 10 minutes in order to eat, what's that? 7.1 hot dogs?
Per minute. It's kind of gross.
And if you watch them, if you haven't seen this, they literally take the hot dog and they'll dip it in water to make the bread all soggy. And they're chomping them like 2, 3 at a time. It's one of the most grotesque things I've ever seen.
And they barely chew them.
I know.
It's like they bite and swallow.
Yes. It's disgusting. It really is disgusting. And I don't know if that's a championship that anybody should really be proud of. Sure, it probably gets you some hot dog endorsements or whatever. But, I mean, how do you not get sick? I mean, they must barf their guts out after this competition to get it all out. I mean, that's the only way.
Every time he wins, he gets another 10 grand.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Let's get to the thought of the Dave. Thought of the Dave happens every night at this time, where during the day we ask you, our great audience, a question on Facebook and Twitter, and then we look forward to your responses. And of course, with it being the 4th of July in the United States, we thought we'd make this one a little bit patriotic for our American fans and listeners. In celebration of America's birthday, what is your favorite 4th of July memory or tradition? Everett, let's start with yours.
I guess my favorite memory would be seeing Eddie Money at this tiny little festival, kind of when he was on a low point in his career, and just seeing him and then seeing the fireworks.
I've only ever spent one 4th of July in the States, and I told this story last night, but it was flying over Lake Ontario, and the minute we crossed into Buffalo, New York, as I was heading to Pittsburgh, all you could see from literally the United States edges of Lake Ontario right until we landed in Pittsburgh was fireworks below. It was one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen. It was just amazing. So I highly suggest, once again, and if you didn't hear me last night, I'll suggest this to you. If you get the opportunity to fly on July 3rd, going into the 4th of July, do it. Do it. It is amazing. Even to take a rental plane up, or like rent a pilot in a plane and just go flying around, it is gorgeous. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous sight. Charles says, traditions? My tradition is saying, watch this. And I'm assuming it's either guzzling beer, eating hot dogs, or watching the fireworks. One of the two, or three. JR, family favorite tradition is not only celebrating America's birthday, but also celebrating my wife's birthday as well. And our listener, Super Len, who has his birthday cape on, happy birthday to you, Len. Roseanne states, my twin girls were born on the 4th of July. That is awesome. Congratulations and happy birthday to your twin girls. Nicola says, Sheridan Island, Tampa. Unfortunately, was in the hotel after a hospital visit, but doctor visited, brought me food and goodies, then made sure I was able to watch the fireworks from within. Well, that's nice of the hospital.
Yes.
Keith jumps in, ribs. Couldn't you go for some good ribs right now?
That would be fantastic.
Catherine states, watching boom, 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 boom. Yes, the amount of fireworks. Did you know, I don't know if you have this in the United States or, but in the lower mainland of British Columbia, like Vancouver East, a lot of communities, even during Canada Day and Halloween, have fireworks banned. Are there communities down there or cities that have banned fireworks?
We have entire states that have banned fireworks.
Really?
Where I live in Illinois, you can't get much more than a smoke bomb and a sparkler.
What about bottle rockets? Those things are the best.
We legally can't get those either.
Yeah, I can't get them up here either. What's wrong with bottle rockets? Gosh, what is this world coming to? Nothing wrong with bottle rockets. Charles states, fireworks display at dusk in the park in St. Martinville, Louisiana, 1976. That's his favorite memory. Gary jumps in, family fireworks with the grandparents, early 80s, when you could still buy real fireworks. Bought a rocket and launched it. Tail fin was bent and shot straight at my grandma, who was sitting in a lounge chair. Heart pumping, hysterical, and exciting all at the same time. Nobody was hurt. Chris George, go ahead, Ev.
I was just going to say, that's good that nobody was hurt.
Chris George Zuger, who is part of our reality paranormal show now, which will be a week tonight, says, when Randy Quaid blew up the mothership to save the world. That was awesome. Independence Day, the movie, the original. Hello, boys. I'm back. Yeah, there was another line to that. Tim says fireworks, of course. Sylvia, fireworks, watching them with her children when they were under 12. Tessa, making Independence Day Codependence Day by getting married this day 14 years ago. Definitely going to miss the fireworks this year as it's too dry for them to be displayed. Please pray for rain, everyone. That's in Colorado. Tim was married in 96 on this day for a year. My gift to myself was a disillusion a year later. Single ever since. My goodness. And on that note, probably a good idea to wrap this thing up. Everett Themer, thanks for an exciting encounter. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Now, once again, you can read the encounter online at facebook.com/SOR The Encounter. Give it a like if you don't mind. We will eventually be moving that over to our website. Want to say a big thank you to Jan Aldrich for coming on in and talking about Foo Fighters and Project 1947. Tomorrow night on the show, this is a story that is going to blow you away. Nelson Dellis is coming in to talk about what it's like to almost die on Mount Everest. Could you imagine? That just freaks me out. It's going to be a great show. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everyone listening at home, in your cars, at work, wherever you may be. Big thank you to everybody watching along on Periscope.tv. Great chatting with you in there. Everyone on Spreaker, thanks for coming on out. Really appreciate your time. Thanks to everyone on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio and the Veterans Club, the SOR Space Travelers on Facebook. Thanks for sharing the show. Thanks for telling your friends and doing your part to make us bigger and better every single night, because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you in 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Good night, everyone. See you tomorrow.
I know you're out there somewhere. This is the new totalitarian state. 1,000 eyes are waiting for you to break. Stay in line, don't make a mistake. We're watching. We watched you